Hi, everyone, and thank you for tuning into the platform. I am your host, Velma Alderson, and as always, I ask you to do that one thing for me, and that's go down and hit that subscribe button. If you are a first-time viewer, welcome. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. We're going to jump right into our story today because I am so excited and I have been working on presenting this and praying and studying, and I'm just really excited to get this story out. So because it's kind of a lengthy story, I'm going to do it in two different videos. So we're going to have part one, and then please tune in and watch part two. But let's go ahead and get started with our story. Our story comes from the book of Ruth. And if you're like me, you probably know a little bit about the story of Naomi and Ruth. Naomi was a widow. Naomi was a widow, and her sons died, and her daughter-in-law Ruth, stayed with her. But there's a lot of detail in that story that most of us don't know. So we're going to break down the book of Ruth. Now, let's start in the beginning. Naomi was married and she had two sons, and they lived in Bethlehem, Judah. Well, because the people of Bethlehem had turned their back on God, he caused there to be a great famine. So, of course, when there's no food, people go in search of food. Well, that's what Naomi and her husband and her sons did. They left Bethlehem and they went to a land called Moab. Now, Moab, the Moabites, they worshiped idols. Well, of course, Naomi and her husband, they were Israelites. They worshiped God. But during this time of famine, they went into not only a foreign land, but they went into a land where the people worshiped pagans. They didn't even follow the same religion. So we're going to stop right there just for a second because sometimes we are so quick to say what we will and what we won't do. We're quick to criticize people for the choices that they make without knowing the full story. Now, if you just look at the story on the surface, you may say, okay, well, you know what? Naomi and her husband and her boys, they just turned their back on God because they got hungry. It goes a lot deeper than that. Naomi never lost her faith in God. Her husband and her sons never turned their back on God, but they did leave Bethlehem and they did go into to Moab, where the Moabites worshipped pagans. But even though they were in a land that was not their own, they did not conform to worshiping pagans. They continued to worship God. So the point in that is, even if you are not where you are supposed to be, that does not mean that you still cannot do the things that you are supposed to be doing. So we're going to go on with the story. Naomi and her husband and their sons, they end up in Moab. Well, apparently, the sons probably were young when they first left Bethlehem, because it says later on they both took a wife. Both of the boys got married. Now, let's think about that for a second. They're in Moab. So they married Moabites. They married women who worshiped pagan gods. Now, and even today, if we're honest, a lot of people have a problem with people marrying outside of their race, people marrying outside of their religion or their culture. So I'm sure maybe Naomi and her husband may have had some issues in the beginning with their boys marrying women that were not of their same religion. The Bible doesn't go into that, but if we just look at the fact of how we are sometimes when people are different, it might have taken a little adjustment, but that's the land that they were in. And they were there for years, because the Bible tells us that after they got there, Naomi's husband died. Life happened, as it does, and Naomi became a widow. The Bible then says that 10 years passed by, and both of her sons also died. So now, not only is Naomi a widow, But her daughters-in-law are also widows. And her daughters-in-law were Ruth and Orpah. We don't hear a lot about Orpah, but she was also one of Ruth's daughters-in-law. So now you have three women. They are widows, they are destitute, they're homeless, they don't have anything. They have absolutely nothing, but they have each other. And I'm going to say they don't have anything because that's how they felt. But as the story goes on, we're going to realize that they had everything that they needed. They had everything that they needed and didn't know it. So Naomi, of course, is devastated. She's lost her husband. She's lost both of her sons. She's in a foreign country. She's with people who are worshiping pagans. And I'm sure she was just like, what else could possibly go wrong? What else could happen? So Naomi hears the word that God has blessed Bethlehem, Judah, and the famine is over. So of course, what's the first thing that Naomi does? Naomi heading for the hills, baby. Naomi trying to get back to the house. She going home. She trying to go back home because the Lord has forgiven as he does. So Naomi's like, look, I need to go home now. With the food situation is worked out, I'm taking it on back to the house. Well, she still has two daughters-in-laws. And there's a very special bond between Naomi and her daughters-in-law. They are not only her daughters-in-law, they are her friends. They are her companions. They are her daughters. She has great love and affection for them. Now, she knew that Naomi knew her situation wasn't very good. Because back in those days, if you did not have a husband and you did not have sons, you were basically at the mercy of anyone. Because you couldn't own property, you were considered the property of your husband. So basically, Naomi didn't have a covering anymore. She didn't have a protector anymore. And neither did Orpah and Ruth. So Naomi tells them, you know what? I can't do anymore. There's nothing else I can do for you. My sons are dead. You were good wives to my sons, and I love you and I appreciate you for being the wonderful wives that you were. You were a good daughter to me, and I love and appreciate that, but there's nothing else I can do. Basically, she told them, you know, I'm old. I can't have any children, and even if I had some children, what you gonna do, wait until they grow up and marry them? So go back to your people, and may the Lord bless you with another husband. The girls weren't listening to that. They didn't want to hear that. Orpah and Ruth were like, no, we want to stay with you. We love you. But Naomi realized that what was best for them was to go and be with their people, to go and have a life, because Naomi didn't want them to end up like her, without a husband and without sons. So Naomi loved them enough to let them go. Now, Ruth and Orpah both loved Naomi, but Orpah kind of thought about that thing for a minute. And after she thought about it and probably weighed her options, she decided that, you know what, Naomi, you might be right. Maybe I do need to go back to my mom's and my dad and try to find me a husband, because I don't want to end up like you. So Orpah left. But she left with Naomi's blessing. Naomi loved her enough to want her to have what she needed. So she blessed her and let her go. Then we had Ruth. Now, Ruth was a different kind of woman. Ruth was a different kind of woman. Ruth said, nah, we ain't doing that. We ain't splitting up. We ain't splitting up. We stand together. Me and you. Naomi was still telling her, Ruth, you need to go. You need to go. Ruth said, look here. Where you go, I'm going. Your God will be my God. Where you live is where I'm going to live. And where you die, is where I'm going to die. Ruth was what we refer to now as a ride or die. Ruth may have been the first true ride or die chick, because that's what she was to her mother-in-law. She said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying with you. So Naomi was just like, okay, well, you know what? Come on, let's go. I already told you it ain't gonna be easy, but let's go. But Ruth was down for it. Ruth was down for whatever was gonna come. So she and Naomi left, heading back to Bethlehem. They arrive in Bethlehem, and they arrive right at the beginning of harvest season. They were harvesting wheat and barley, and of course everybody was all excited, and the people remembered Naomi. Naomi had been gone for years, and when she returned, they remembered her. But Naomi was so downtrodden. She was so beat down she was depressed. She was grieving. She was homeless. She was destitute. She was lonely, afraid. All of the things that we as women deal with are in our daily lives now. Naomi was dealing with all of that. And on top of that, she had a young lady with her that she felt responsible for. She had Ruth to worry about as well. So when Naomi got back to Bethlehem, she was just wore out. She was like, look, don't even call me Naomi, because Naomi is a name that means joy. Call me Mara. Naomi was so over it. She was like, look, don't even call me by my old name no more, baby, because I'm just so broke down right now. I can't even be Naomi no more. That's how broke down she was. But when she got there, her priority was still on Ruth. She was determined that Ruth was not going to end up in the same situation that she was in. So she tells Ruth to go to the fields and see if someone will let her go behind their harvesters and just pick up what's left. Now I'm going to stop right here because I want to give you a word, and I want you to take some time and study that word. I'm going to give you a couple words, actually. The first one is provision. Provision. Because God is a God of provision. So I want you to study that and look that up and get a real tight grasp on the definition of the word provision. And then I want you to look up the word proactive, because God is a proactive God. See, we usually are reactive. Something happens and we react. God is not that way, because he already knows what's coming. So he's proactive. He already has it mapped out and planned out. Even when it looks crazy to us, nothing sneaks up on God. The tricks and the traps of the enemy may catch us off guard, but it doesn't catch God off guard. So we're going to stop right here with Ruth heading out to find a field that she can glean in, hoping that someone will let her just go behind them. So hopefully Ruth will find someone that will help her out. But you're going to have to look at part 2 to find out. Thanks for tuning in to the platform. Peace.